COVID-19, or the coronavirus, as many of us know it, is the virus which has currently brought the world to a standstill. In many nations, in many countries, their economies are struggling as a result, and there are a lot of things happening all over the globe. Death rates are skyrocketing, many people are getting infected, and many people are living in fear and panic. If you are a believer, this brings an interesting scenario to your view. Churches in many nations have had to close down. Pastors have had to resort to speaking to their members through digital media platforms. And there's a lot that is visibly changing in our world as we knew today. Just before 2020, we had various visions for the world ahead. Currently in this year, it's been just 4 months and things have taken a turn upside down. As a Christian, you can't help but wonder, how is the world going to look like after this pandemic? Are things ever going to be the same? Are we going to be able to practice our faith the way we've had to do over the years? These and many more questions are what we're going to look to answer on this episode of The True Perspective with Agostino. My partner and I are going to address this issue head on. We're going to tackle it from all angles, and we're going to look to bring some solutions and answers to many baffled minds in this tenuous period. Join us right here on this channel. Make sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell so that when the videos drop, you'll be the first to know. Corona is causing havoc, but we are the body of Christ and we hold the power of God. Join us, let us discuss this issue, let us come up with solutions, and let us see how we can move the world after this pandemic is defeated. Okay, you've said a lot of interesting things in your submissions, both of you, and it's leading me to ask a couple of questions. We had the Ebola epidemic some few years back, which affected almost all our neighbors. Ghana, for some reason, was spared within that period, and there were vaccines created for this Ebola epidemic, and I don't think there was this sort of backlash for that vaccine specifically, which brings to the fore this question: how come this time around there's been such a vocalization of opposition towards this whole situation and then vaccines in general? I think you've Dr. Wu, you've mentioned some factors which might contribute to this concern. The fact that vaccines normally have to take a period of time, and now everything is sort of being jammed up together and then fast tracked, and with a lot of uncertainties surrounding it. But I also want to ask this question. Currently, it looks as if it's not the idea of vaccination itself, which is a concern to many people. And the reason why this is actually important is most of the opposition towards these ideas have come from the Christian circles, not just in Africa, but around the world. The Christian circles have been majorly the opposition towards these ideas. And Christian scientists in America and other places have come out and have voiced out various concerns. In my research, I've come across a lot of articles by renowned Christian scientists who have raised a lot of controversial, in the normal sense, ideas concerning how things are being run. It looks as if the whole challenge with this situation now is not necessarily the vaccine in itself, but then the mandated bodies who can give these approvals and then these go-aheads. People do not trust these organizations anymore. People sort of have question marks about these organizations and where they are getting their financing from, and then the idea that whoever is financing you can influence whatever it is you are doing. And these concerns are, and to validate it, it's not just Trump who has come against WHO. Congress has come against WHO, the US Congress itself. have come against WHO. Like I said, I chanced upon the letter they sent to WHO. Taiwan have come against WHO. A lot of bodies that usually you would not find alluding to some of these things we will usually call conspiracy theories have all of a sudden gained voices against some of these things. We've seen situations where some scientists are now debunking the whole idea of vaccination, that if we are saying it still will come with unknowns, then why not try other avenues and other things? So there are all these things happening, and it boils down to one thing: trust in the systems that have been in place, trust in the people running these systems, because at the end of the day, people feel that they have been influenced in the opposite direction. And like I said, most of the opposition have come from the Christian circles. I have a lot of open tabs here with a lot of documentations from government sources, from very scientific sources, which sort of come up with a lot of question marks. Now, for one, the latest one is China is refusing any sort of investigation even into the history of this particular strain of the virus, because scientists have been asking for entry into China to go to that market that they purported this thing broke out for. And China is refusing all these requests. And there are a lot of Europe has written a lot of letters, EU has written a lot of letters concerning this. So you can see that concerning this virus, most of the concerns is coming from governmental organizations and bodies which normally would have debunked every sort of theory which comes as a conspiracy theory. You mentioned the idea of the chip in the vaccine and all that. This was brought, I know, like you said, from like 2016. I have a video here that I would have wanted to play of a scientist who was talking about the fact that they've made various strides. This was a scientific forum, and he was saying they've made various strides in digitization, and then that is the biodigitization of information and the chips and all that. And he talked about this years ago, even before this virus came, even before this pandemic. And he mentioned the strides they've made about how people can control their TV and all that. And this was a scientific forum with world-renowned scientists, and this was before the pandemic.
Yeah.
Now, this particular instance where this conversation has come up again, like I said, was spearheaded by no other person than Bill Gates, because if he had not brought it up in that Reddit interaction, I'm not sure that whole consideration. So the sources from which all these conflicting theories and all that have come from is what makes it a bit curious. Should we be concerned about the leanings of governments, world organizations, political structures, these NGOs and all that? Because they are the ones driving the information circle now.
Yeah.
And currently everything happening is sort of creating this whole bubble of doubt. So should we be concerned about them?
Yeah. If you look at a system where 90% of the wealth of the entire world is controlled by only 10% of the population of the world, you would know that there are people who are obviously consciously or unconsciously controlling others. That's little we know, that 90% of the wealth in the entire world is controlled by only 10% of the world's population, as it were. And those that control the money control the world, if I should say.
Direction, yeah.
So there are obvious leanings and agendas that will not be made public, that will not be made known to everybody else. It's not a democracy that the world is trying to lean towards. Someone begins a discovery and believes that it has a possibility to bring a better outcome for the world from his perspective, and begins to pursue it. And I mean, let me talk about the beginnings of medical science, for example. It was not accepted globally when it began. It was literally like a cult at the beginning. They started by, I mean, monitoring disease of people, then studying dead bodies. At a point, they had to, what made it more of a dangerous cult was they had to monitor how the body is while the person is freshly alive. So people were being killed fresh to study. You know, a lot of strange things have happened, even in the US. syphilis treatment testing, where some people were forcefully infected with the disease and then observed. So there are a lot of things that happen from a perspective of a small group of people who believe that this is what is best for the world and pursue it. And as they pursue it, as to whether it will be good for us or not, posterity will tell. We have seen, okay, now that whatever they did in medical science may have been good, even though those at the time may not have thought it to be wise. And good, true to the fact that a lot of people may have suffered the consequences as at that time. With that point laid down, I also want to say that the issues surrounding all of this conspiracy, like you started by saying, the issue about Ebola did not draw as much attention as this one is drawing now. Mainly because when there's failure, people begin to question the doubts or the credibility of those who are supposed to be in control. As long as things are going right, nobody questions you. You may be driving and you may have some problems with your car. You will not have, nobody will know you don't have a license until there's an issue, maybe a speeding or something, the police or a checkpoint, and they ask you, where's your license? You don't have it. Then you now start having the consequences of the lack. Otherwise, you may have been going free without it for a long time. What I mean by that is that the Ebola, SARS, MERS may not have dragged for this long and may not have had such a global effect as this is having. And because of that, it may not have attracted so many players. Number one, Ebola like this was affecting a lot of Africans. And we ourselves were not asking too many questions as we may have to be asking. If you have an illness that is affecting the British Prime Minister and the North Korean Prime Minister and all of that, you should know that some big guns will be asking questions and doing a lot of investigations into it. Those are the things that bring rise to a lot of the concerns that this has. MERS was affecting mainly Saudi Arabia and a few other countries. I think 27 other countries were being also affected. Did not draw much attention because it was in some way Asia. But something that is affecting Europe, something that's affecting America, something that's affecting the whole world has everybody looking at different perspectives and asking different questions. I don't know if you get the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm
Yeah,
trying to make is that,
yeah.
number one, this has lasted enough
Longer than it should. Yeah.
as there are other pandemics that may have lasted equally long enough. I mean, like the outbreaks in the 1918s, the Spanish flu, which lasted almost 3 years or so. There have been the Black Plague, which also lasted a number of years, which had the whole world. I saw a picture, even a cat was wearing a face mask somewhere in 1918, was on a global scale. The world was on a standstill trying to find a way to it. People were asking so many questions. And it will amaze you that even in those times, people felt it was the end of the world. I've read articles from renowned men of God. I mean, Saint Agostino so wrote something during the era of the Black Plague or one of the plagues. Renowned men of God have written things about those plagues in those times, also presupposing that it may be the end, or I mean, all kinds of theories surrounding it. So the point I need us to understand is that when you have something that affects the whole world and lasts this long, we would have a lot of worry, anxiety, and people are going to postulate a lot of things. And with enough power, any statement you make or any position you take can be backed, I mean, with with or without evidence. Once you are in a certain position, if the president of Ghana says something right now, even as a joke, I mean, later is to say that a joke, there are a lot of people who will side with him or otherwise. And so we need to understand that once it reaches a global scale, it should attract this much attention. And once it lasts for this long and this many people are dying, it should attract this much attention. Now, as it's attracting all of this attention, it is true that we should be wary of the leanings of the various people in power, understanding that they all have their own um, 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 if I should say, prejudice or their own leaning, their own personal belief, their own understanding of things. And so, if a country like America is to lean in one direction, they control a good amount of the wealth of the whole world. If they are to stray off into another direction, it's something that is important. and that is going to affect generally the fight. I have seen on Twitter also so many accounts about hacking into China, into
Yeah,
Wuhan,
WHO and all that. Apparently, getting emails and documents. Yeah.
you know, all of those things. So yes,
Hello, Kinsey. Hello. Hello, Kinsey. Yeah, I think we might have lost Kingsley there. Thomas, maybe you can also answer the same question for me now that we seem to have lost Kingsley. Um, Looking at the mistrust of the organizations which have been in charge of all these things, and the fact that some of the people who have had authority to speak on these matters are not necessarily medical doctors. Bill Gates is not a medical doctor, but then he's been at the forefront of the conversation. And when people realize that he has a lot of investment when it comes to vaccinations and all that, it is creating a sort of reluctance on the part of people to buy into most of what he's preaching. Like I said, the whole issue about even the chips being put into the vaccines got validity as a result of something he said, because these things have been purported years ahead, even before the pandemic, and had never really gained traction. But once he said it, and he's an authority figure somewhat, because he's the second major financier of the World Health Organization, then obviously it brings a cause for concern for a lot of people. So should we be concerned about the leanings of these organizations, of governments, of political structures?
My take on this issue is every organization will definitely have an inclination, because deep within the hearts of men, they want to put forth an agenda, and that agenda finds expression in everything they do, more so in whatever office they occupy. And the fear is that the agendas they have, many of them believe, many of them strongly believe in that they are good for the world. Strongly believe. I don't think I don't think there are many people who will consciously want to put forth an agenda that will cause any serious harm, maybe at the extension of the human race, or where whatever. Everybody believes that whatever agenda he has, well, I would say many people believe that what agenda they have will contribute to the better good of the world. Think there are some few bad nuts in the system, whom I believe those guys do exist. Those guys, forward by hatred or racism, will want to, in their quest, wipe out certain people, or put a certain group under oppression. So I believe there's no doubt about that people have agendas. So we should create a system such that the whole office or the organizations, they are sanitized in that way. For instance, we realize that in Africa, in Ghana, there's a lot of bribery and corruption. And bribery and corruption, it's not really because there isn't so much outside, because they are human beings. Those in America and those outside, they are all human beings with all these human inclinations. But the reason we don't normally hear of bribery and corruption in the outside world is that they have spent enough resources to build systems that will mitigate and curtail, or make it very difficult for people to use their system for their own advantage. And so I believe that these are things that we need to consciously put forth, because most people believe, even pastors, men of God, everybody believes strongly that whatever vision, whatever agenda he has will bring up the betterment of the world. But as to the fact that it actually will, that is a different story. And so we need to create a system that allows these agendas to be sanitized enough. And I don't think any of us is in the position as at now. So what we can do as at now is in the long term, we look at occupying these offices, these roles, so that we could influence these systems with the agenda that God has given us. But as for now, I believe the best we can do is to gather as much information as we can about some of these processes, because in the long run, whatever they decide, whatever they settle on, it will affect us one way or the other. And so this is just my take on it. We should really be concerned and pray, because obviously there isn't much we can do to influence whatever they choose to do. But what we can do is that this concern must build enough drive in us to pray about it, to intercede. We pray, God, put in these places of authority your own people who will advance your own purposes and your own will. These are prayers we need to pray. Really, if there's one thing that I would take from all these concerns being raised, is that we really need to take a serious look at these bodies. And one way we do that is we pray. We prayerfully consider. We pray and we push ourselves into these places of power. And whilst we do that, we spend enough time to gather enough information. We gather enough accurate information. We try to be objective as possible, defend our stand. And by so doing, we will be able to handle this issue quite well. I think that's my take.
Okay, Alvin, welcome.
I think his microphone is on mute.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, can you hear me?
yes. I think
Yeah.
I can hear myself. I can
Yeah.
hear you now.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was like, sorry for being late. I hope my apologies. My apologies accepted.
Oh, it's accepted. I understand. I understand the challenge you were facing. So
Yeah,
I hope
exactly.
all is well.
I mean, by God's grace, as a Christian, it should always be well with you. So it's okay. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Nice to have you. So we've already done much of the discussion. We've looked at the fact that are Christians being overly cautious and sensitive, and do we have a cause to be concerned about this pandemic? And then are vaccines the answer, and should we be wary? We are currently addressing the issue of concerns about the leanings of governments, world organizations, and political structures. We are still in the discussion frame of this because it looks as if much of the opposition to much of these systems that we've been used to is coming from the Christian circles. Now, when Thomas was talking, I believe you were listening. And one thing he said that I want to ask you is he raised the concern about God placing people from within our fold in some of these areas to push God's agenda in these institutions. I want to believe that there are Christian scientists, there are Christian engineers, there are Christian diplomats. I want to believe that there are people who love God and are on fire for God in most of these institutions we are talking about. Why do you think these people are not being so vocal in this time when the church actually needs to hear from them? Because here's a case that most of the people we are hearing from are people that the church cannot necessarily trust because of probably their track record or some past dealings. But then we have Christians in these bodies. Why are they quiet? Why are they not talking? What is constituting this silence that we are facing? Because almost everyone raising concern, like Thomas said, are not people that you can necessarily say are Christians. Most of the people who have raised all these conspiracies and these theories about most of these are not Christian. But most of what they are talking about are going to affect Christians. If these things tend to come about, it's Christians who necessarily might face the brunt of it. So why are our scientists, our technical people, our engineers, why are they quiet? Why aren't they voicing out these issues?
Okay, I think I understand where you're coming from. Now, number one, the thing is that what we are saying now, I'm not really sure how far it could go, but we might be censored because YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, they brought out a policy that when we sort of talk about the coronavirus or this COVID-19 thing, and even just by expressing our views, our accounts might be blocked. Now, you realize that there was a video circulating on Instagram and WhatsApp and I think Facebook as well and YouTube of a guy who is Christian, who was the CEO of Vodafone. I think it was sort of given us the light of, it was sort of the relation between 5G and coronavirus, but he's been censored. Now the video is off YouTube. Donald Trump is Christian, of course, and his personal pastor or his advisor is Paula White. So obviously Paula White, who is Christian, who might have some knowledge, will be advising Trump. But now the whole thing is, who really runs things now? Because, I mean, now we are being censored, so we don't even have freedom of speech. We can't say what we think. And when you say what you think, is either your account is blocked, you're queried, or you're questioned. So you can't even have, that freedom to talk. Now, that notwithstanding, some people also know the truth because, in the face of war or anything, you should also stand up as a soldier. The fact that you are being censored does not mean you should also voice out what you think, or, you shouldn't bring out facts. Now, I think, I'm not really sure. Yeah, I think Thomas Okai was talking about Bill Gates and the vaccines and all of that. Now, one thing we should understand is that yesterday, Microsoft went up by $10 billion. And that should raise an alarm. In a period like this, no company should be making that much money. So it should really raise some concern. And also, an IT guy should not have a say. You could have a form of knowledge in the medical field, but you don't have a medical degree. You are not to lead the boat in the first place. And another thing that, according to statistics, the recoveries on Earth currently is way more than we don't even need a vaccine for this. So if someone is trying to push an agenda of a vaccine, who also is a pioneer of Planned Parenthood, I think we should be asking ourselves some questions.
Now, I think you mentioned the issue of censorship. I would want to focus a bit more there because today there was, in the course of, I was following a certain interview of one of the top scientists in the US who was being interviewed by a media house, a news agency. So it's like a 7 p.m. news where he was brought on. But he had a contrary view to what Dr. Fauci, the one who
Yeah,
normally is at the
the
press
CD.
conferences.
Yeah, this.
Yeah, he had a varying view from most of the things Dr. Fauci has said. And so I chanced upon this video in the course of my research on Facebook, and there was a link to the YouTube. I went to the YouTube and it had been blocked, that it was
Exactly.
going against community rules. So that video of essence had been blocked. But the few minutes I got, he raised, and this is a medical professional. This is someone who is
Exactly.
working as a doctor. And he mentioned some letters that have been sent out to those medical, to he, the doctor had received, which were raising a lot of questions. And he's the second doctor that I've actually witnessed live being interviewed and was saying something contrary to the popular narrative that we are all aware of. Now, if Christian scientists, if Christian doctors, if Christian engineers, if we are being silenced, doesn't this mean that it is about time that we look for alternative ways of sending our information out? Because aside even being blocked, there's also being discredited. You can't be
Exactly.
discredited for express. Doesn't this call for the church to start looking into creating? I think last week the discussion was centered around creating alternative platforms. Can't we have a way? Because now all these platforms are being run by the Bill Gates, the Zuckerbergs, and all those. So if they're not going to allow you, that means we will not of necessity have access to information that we can trust. And
No.
currently there's a lot happening that is really raising a lot of questions. So in your view, how do we circumvent this issue? Because if the issue is about censorship, if the issue is about muzzling any alternate view from the popular narrative. And I believe freedom of speech should allow every form of narrative to be out there for people to pick as and when, and then do their own investigations and all that. Thomas has been advocating for that all evening, that we should not be lazy. We should go out there. We should seek information. We should validate the information. Now, if people with alternative views are being muzzled, shouldn't we come up with alternates, or how do we circumvent this whole thing to get the information that people need out there? What do we do about this whole situation? You are a software developer, so I want to throw this at you before I go to Kingsley.
I mean, I really thank God for Donald Trump, because if Trump was not the president of America, trust me, I mean, he is not politically correct. He just frees his mind and says what he wants to say. Now, one thing that we have to understand is that this whole thing is obviously, we know the genesis of this thing is from the enemy, and the enemy uses human agents to, he delegates task, tries to execute it, and all, and on and on. Now, as Christians, I think that now we have to, like you said, the solution is to build our own platforms and advocate. We have to bring the awareness. We have to shift. For my church, we now have our own sort of Instagram, like King's Chat as well, in Pastor Chris and all that. But now we don't. It should not necessarily be sort of a one church thing, or how do I put it? Solely based on Christianity, but Christian developers should now be very innovative. So we have to bring Christian innovation in this thing. I mean, fine, it could be public. You don't have to be Christian to be on the platform, but it could be just like was it Twitter or Facebook or Instagram? It could be that, and then, or sort of how do I put it? Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be necessarily centered on Christianity, but it should be owned by Christians, so that everybody can get on the platform. And to do this, trust me, it's not going to be that easy. It needs prayers. It needs a lot of work. We need to really get this thing out. This is the time that this COVID-19 has really exposed some loopholes, especially in Christendom. And as young guys, or as young men, this is actually the time that we have to start thinking. The developers, the engineers, not just software developers, but even Christian entrepreneurs, they should get into software development. They should try and push platforms. They should try and put the agenda of having our own platforms. I mean, we can also compete. Thank God, I was really, I think I was listening to Kanye West yesterday, and I really thank God for that guy. God really showed off with Kanye, and he's bringing stuff like that up as well. So yes, it's gonna. I mean, we have to get our own platform, but looking at this whole thing, it is possible with God. To be very honest with you, and we should we should also try and advise Christians. I mean, the young ones and the very young ones to get into IT and software development. They should be innovative. They should try and so that because obviously, yes, our generation we can start it, but we need to make the kids aware that hey, of course you cannot impose any career on anybody, but obviously we should start thinking, and especially those in the field already should start really. We should work hard. I'll put it that way, because the goal is really big, and to fight against these sorts of giants. They are not giants, of course, but in not in that sense. But it's gonna take because Microsoft was not built in a day. Facebook was not built today. It took time. Twitter was not even built today. So it will take time for this thing to work. But yes, the time is now. The time is not tomorrow.
Okay. Now, still on that. Now, as you're saying, building these platforms, creating these alternatives is going to take time. In the interim, though, information, like we're saying, from any dissenting voice is being shut down. During the Ebola pandemic, there were people who had alternate views. I read some articles of scientists in the US. I think US was trying to prevent Ebola from really coming into their borders, and they were trying to deliberate on the methodology to use, and there were dissenting views from all sides, but they were allowed to voice it out so that a consensus could be built. Now, when it comes to Corona, we've not had this luxury. Any dissenting voice is being shut up. I asked you a question about Christian. We are not hearing from Christian scientists. We are not hearing from Christian engineers. We are not hearing from Christian diplomats, Christians who are in these power circles, who could probably throw more light to alleviate some of the doubts and the apprehensions in the body of Christ. Because much of the opposition, like I said, is coming from the church. If you go to the US, much of the court cases concerning coronavirus is being brought by churches, because they have all these technical people in there who feel like some of the things being carried out have hidden agendas behind them that have to be exposed. And there's a whole lot happening in many circles. Now, to wait for an app or a platform is going to take years, probably. What do we do now? Because now many people cannot say things that probably they want to say. Like I said, this video was on Facebook. I saw it. I was following up to find the actual footage, and it has been taken off.
And now it's not even about being Christian, so you be sense. I mean, it's just basically anything that goes contrary to what they say,
to the popular narrative. So what do we do now? What do we know now? We are looking at it from the Christian perspective. What do we do now?
I mean, this is a question is a tough one, because then a lot has to go into this thing. Now, like I told you, it's not even just the applications or these digital platforms, but also Christian entrepreneurs should start investing in in the media as well, because it's not just about WhatsApp, Facebook, or any application only, but also we should also start thinking on, because this whole thing is targeted at the real target is not even the world, it's just us. Because now in Virginia, or is it Virginia, one of the places, you can be jailed up to a year when you go to church, but you're allowed to obviously fellowship, I think about 25 people or 50, I'm not really sure of the number. So obviously we know the real target is us. Like I'm saying, we have to be, because I think that our business models must change as well, in the sense that if God blesses you as a Christian, you also have to try and sort of invest in the tech world or in the media, you can have a radio station, which, I mean, obviously is a very powerful form of media as well, or medium of communication. So it shouldn't necessarily be the applications or, I mean, what's it called, the digital platforms, but also the radio stations. Journalists should come out now. We should have Christian journalists as well. We should have Christian bloggers like you, and I'm really, really grateful. That's why, even though I couldn't make it on time, I had to come. I really, really thank God for, I mean, giving you this idea to bring this whole thing together, because trust me, I mean, there are many Christians out there who are not doing what you're doing, and what we're doing is actually the calling, that is a calling of God, and we're actually doing the right thing as well. And we're educating is a form of education to the public as well. It does not necessarily have to be, now unfortunately, even on WhatsApp now, you can't even send more than 4 or 5 messages. I'm not really sure. Even WhatsApp is being censored. So the best way is to trust me. I mean, because the only way to get information out is through the internet now in the first place. Secondly, radio stations, and then I think the third one will be verbally, just talking with your friends and all that. But I think Thomas mentioned about getting the information as well. We should study to show ourselves approved. We should learn. We should not just we should look at the right materials to draw out information. We should go out there, get as much information as we can out there as Christians. But trust me, investing in the digital platforms, and not just digital platform, but in the sense, but in the radio stations as well, just sharing, spreading the word. That's what we can do, because these people own the internet. Elon Musk, the owner of Tesla, is actually setting up many satellites. Because I don't really know how this will be censored, so I'm trying to use the right words so that we are not taken out as well. But Elon Musk is getting many satellites out there, which is sort of, I'm sure I'm trying to make the signs so that everyone understands what I'm trying to say, because of course we might be censored. So I hope everyone understands where I'm moving at, or the direction that I'm trying to move at. And Bill Gates, obviously, everyone knows. I don't know, but let me just say I don't know. I've with the information that I've had, he has, I heard he has an agenda. Of course, I know, but yeah, let me put it that way, to depopulate people and depopulate. And he's now 10 billion up. I mean, his company is $10 billion up in revenue in COVID, in a period like this. That's scary. So we should channel we should invest in this area now, because what's it called, in the olden days, in the Bible, the news spread as well, and you realize that there was no Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or radio station then. But as Jesus was doing the miracles, the news went really, really bad. It was even spreading more than this. So we should physically spread the word. We should change our conversations. We should talk about things that would not just benefit us, but also the kingdom, we as Christians. So, and we should try and get the information to as many as, even you can even make it simple for your granny or your grandpa or whoever it is, your auntie, even if they don't even understand it, you would find a way to explain it to them in Triga, whichever language, and they would understand. And obviously the message will be going on and on, because these people, old people meet and they talk. They have lots of times at their hands, so they are pensioners, and some are not really like, so they talk, so it spreads and it goes on and on and on. So yes, one of them is, like I told you, on these digital platforms. and radio station, we should invest there. And as we should also make it verbal. In our conversations, we should tell people, and we should try and enlighten people and let them know if you have any information that you think it'll be beneficial, because the target is not just one person; it's a whole body. So yeah,
Okay.
that's the next one.
Kingsley, you're a medical doctor, and so this question
Yeah.
applies to you. Why aren't Christian scientists, Christian doctors, Christian engineers, why aren't we hearing from them? And if it's
I can
yeah,
I just come and you know what? Casey's a doctor, right? Now
yeah,
the funny thing is that if Kingsley's a doctor and he is also going to voice out, he risk losing his job as well. So
of course, that's
these people have anyway. Just go on with Kingsley, because they're really attacking almost
okay.
everybody in every area. But yeah,
Okay, so like I was saying, Kingsley, why aren't we hearing from these
Okay.
people? Because at the end of the day, if you're not trusting the sources where most of the information is coming from, then we should be hearing from people like us that we can trust. But these people are weirdly enough very quiet. We are not hearing from Christian scientists. We are not hearing from Christian journalists. We are not hearing from Christian leaders in political spheres and all that. We are basically not saying anything. If it's about censorship, how do we then
Yeah.
maneuver our way
Yeah.
around it? What's your take? Yeah.
Good. This is what I personally think. I made a statement earlier that about 90% of the world's finances is being handled by 10% of the world population, which means that those small number of people are making the shots or calling the shots. Generally, what you hear is what they want you to hear. So the point is not as much as they are not speaking, but the point is what you are being allowed to hear. I have always had the impression that what we see, even on the news, even in our local politics and things, is not exactly what is always going on the ground.
Of course.
All these news
Yes.
agents receive their funding based on what you are selling, what message you are pushing, and that is where you get the funding from. So, depending on the inclinations of that 10% who are handling majority of the money, the information you get, because I have been in some groups or some circles, and contrary to the notion that they are not speaking, there are a good number of people who are speaking. I mean, even with this whole 5G thing that came up, we saw Pastor Chris, I mean, all over on the news. We have mentioned that it's the Christian organizations that are fighting most of these things that are going, which means that these Christian organizations are speaking, and most of their statements are not just unfounded, but there are, I believe, specialists
Technical
or
people.
professionals
Yeah.
inform some of, like, otherwise an argument like that will not hold in court without a professional. You should at least have a lawyer who will go ahead of you. There should be someone who will give you reasonable sound advice to make certain statements that are being made.
Mhm.
And so I believe that the Christian populace is speaking, and there are things that we are making. There are various angles that we are coming from when it comes to corporate prayer about the issue. I know Archbishop has been saying a number of things. There have been a number of corporate, I mean, prayers that have been called together by various groups and things. The Christian Council, the GNPCC, and all of that. These are the big shots in the country who are making their stake on certain things. But then again, what we are hearing is what those with, if I should say, some
mainstream media.
stake here. You get my point. So
Mhm.
we are hearing what they want us to. That is why I also side with the argument for us to have a platform where some form of information can be shared, like this King's share in Christ Embassy, like this, which is good in itself if we could have a number of churches and have a way that we can interconnect some of these systems that already exist. We can do a lot of sharing of information. I mean, escaping some of the censorship that can be brought in from some of these higher powers. But then again, there's already some form of dominance in the market. I mean,
Yeah.
Bill Gates, for example, owns Microsoft. All computers, generally, all your softwares and everything that you are running, I mean, has a way of going through this form of censorship. We have people who own Google. There's a whole sub-internet. I know there's a deeper web beyond the normal web. The software engineers
Yeah.
know more about
Yeah.
that. Some people say there's a dark web, there's a dark net, there's
Yeah.
something beyond what everybody goes onto the internet now, and everything you search is in Google. But Google is not the only search engine that we have. So everything you find is what is on Google, or what Google wants you to know about. So what I think we can do as it stands now is to promote or invest in some of the other alternate means that we can have, so that the voices of these people can actually be heard. And it would take some amount of funding, I mean, for some of these projects to be able to be fully rolled out, to be able to, I mean, sell a product that can probably, in a way, be a competitor to what already exists. Because the product will not self-perpetuate itself on the market. It will not keep running without some form of sustainability. So there's a lot that needs to go into creating an alternative means that can make the voices of these people heard. But I believe, on the contrary, that these people are speaking. I know Bishop Dad is speaking. I know, like a lot of, I may not mention names of some individuals, but I know the stake that a lot of people are making. I know a number of one very time pastor who has several doctors across the world. He has a global church, several doctors across the world who make, I mean, statements, and they are combining their research and their findings, and I mean, suggesting propositions and how we can steer our way through this pandemic. So these things are being said. These things are being done. Depending on the circles we find ourselves in, globally, we may not hear much about it because it's not appetizing to the masses who may have a stake or who may have something to benefit from this whole pandemic. So what we need to do is probably invest in all these human resource, financial resource, technical resource into all these alternate dimensions, like Pastor Chris is doing with Kingshare. We could have something like that going on in, because the church now is a strong organization with masses of people belonging to the churches. As the last time I checked, evangelical records, as at, it's quite old. 9 years ago, as at 2011, we have about 2.2 billion Christians in the world, which is a good number. About a third of the world's population are Christians who belong to one or two, I mean, recognized denominations in the world. So if we have such a mass followership, if we can have our leadership rally people together, and then, I mean, put all our resources together, I believe that we can bring something that will be a force to reckon. And if all our minds are together, and I mean, that's another challenge with the unity of the church as at large, I mean, in general, with the various denominations, that becomes a challenge. If we can pull resources together to, I mean, offset a particular agenda, or one particular agenda, or one particular move. But I believe that if we can do that, we have the resources, we have the people, we have the brains. There are Christian journalists who are good. There are Christian scientists who are very good. There are Christian doctors who are as skilled as all these people in all these other, just that they may lack funding, they may lack the right platform to say what they have to say and things like that. So if we can come together as a body and fund what we have to do, I think that we can make some headway.
Okay, Thomas, we've today we've gone far beyond time because the discussion has been very heated and very interesting, and we are not even halfway through. Meaning, we would have to definitely come back and continue this conversation. But I'll want to be rounding up with you for tonight. Based on what we've said so far, I would want to have your take as well, because we all believe that a lot of the information roaming out there if we had people from within our circles saying some of these things and then giving some validity to these things, there will be a bit more confidence in what we are hearing. But the challenge is currently we are not hearing from our people. Churches are talking, and like Kingsley said, a pastor like, let's say Pastor Chris, won't just come and stand there and say anything without having some technical people behind him feeding him with whatever information he has. But then we are in a world which is dominantly being run by people who are non-Christian. And so there's a way to discredit whatever information you bring out there. There's a way to censor whatever information you bring out there. So first of all, why aren't we hearing from these people as we should? And if it's like your Alvin and Kingsley has said, then what would you suggest? I think Kingsley mentioned the fact that the unification of the churches is going to be an issue. Is there a way around it? Because I believe technical people, we don't have to be limited by denominations and by churches. The fact that we believe in Christ, I believe, should be enough for us to come together if something of this sort has to be done so that we actually achieve a purpose. What can we do if that is the case? And why aren't we hearing from these people?
Okay. First of all, there might be a number of reasons we are not hearing from them. I don't think it is just one reason. But the possible reasons I can think of right now, I think censorship is part, but it is not everything. It doesn't paint the whole picture. Maybe one aspect is that there might not be enough of us in these fields. And even if there are, it might not be, vocal enough. There's this kind of perception that Christians are more conservative. They aren't as aggressive and as vocal as the others are. That we might be deceived to think that as long as someone has the tag of being a Christian, he or she fully subscribes to the full worldview that we know a Christian should subscribe to. Some people are just Christians with a tag. I hear even Obama identified with a church just because he wanted to be a governor. At a point in time when he wanted to be a governor of a state, I hear one of their rules was that he had to identify with a church within. And so if you should ask him which religion he identified, he will just say, he might even say Christian. So we might be, deceiving ourselves to think that we have enough representation in these places. And also, with regard to what we can do, I agree that the long-term plan is to have a platform of our own where we can, have the freedom and liberty to actually air our views and promote the agenda that God has given us. But for the interim, I believe what we can do is to use effectively the existing structures that already exist. Right now, even I think the church I belong to, we run this kind of a cell system. So when even this disease, these sanctions or these limitations were placed on churches, I don't think it really affected us so much, because the church was already broken up into cells, and every cell had. So we could still do a certain point. So we could build from we could start with what we have. What we have even in the days of Acts, the church we had
churches in houses,
where people could just in an area could just congregate and then have meaningful discussions. So as I was saying, we can start with what we have, and we build from there to where. And also, one thing that I will advocate for is that if there's one thing which is immune, or which is relatively immune to attacks, is presenting a defense. I mean, a solid defense, irrefutable defense, such that when anybody comes to censor it, it will be obvious. He himself will be afraid of censoring it. I believe where one reason there is so much censorship might be because a lot of people, I mean, say things and they are not really founded. They might be right, they might be true, but in the end, you fail to actually. But of course, I agree that sometimes you can put forth a defense, a very solid defense. But because of the hidden agendas running these organizations, censorship can still follow. But at least we can make it a little bit difficult for the kind of content we put forth to be censored. I remember this man of God, I think he passed away some years ago, Miles Moreau. He had the privilege of speaking at the UN. I think it was a conference or whatever. And he never made mention of Jesus Christ, but he preached the gospel. Because the point is we also need to know how to package our message very well. Very well. There is this Christian apology that I have been following. And I like his the arguments he makes. They are arguments that any rational or any reasonable individual will be able to follow. It is consistent. It's very difficult. The arguments he plays for, they are airtight. That you will have to. I mean, it will be very obvious if you have any counter arguments that you are just making a case. You are just making a sentimental case, but not one that is actually logically consistent. So I believe it is not. We need to look at it from multiple angles. We need to look at it from multiple angles, because sometimes we sort of think in black and white, either this or that. But we need to be innovative to find how we can navigate, use the system to our advantage. And I hear there was a time in Russia when Bibles were censored, and even in Iran, places Bible was censored. But people find innovative ways to still get, these Bibles true and all this. I believe it all boils down to we serve a God who has ideas. He never runs out of ideas. But one thing I have found with a lot of us, a lot of Christians, is that many of us are lazy. I'm lazy intellectually. And part of the reason is because we sort of have this view that, let us leave everything in the hands of God. You get me? So we just assume a part of the work that God should do. And we assign ourselves just minimal, just a small part of the work. But in reality, that might not be actually the case. One thing that I have found with unbelievers, people who do not really subscribe to any belief in any higher power, also is that they have they have an aggressive approach. They attack everything head on. They put their heart and their soul in everything that they do. And it all amounts to all that. But if, as Christians, we could combine this attitude, this go-get attitude, with our belief in a higher power, there's no way we can be outmatched by these unbelievers or these people with hidden agendas. I watched a video some time ago, and I was quite intrigued. It was said that many of the poor countries in the world, many of them are also heavily religious countries. And the stats were there. You can't actually refute it. It's there. But he made an exception. He said the exception is with the nation America. They have been successful in combining their religious background with that go-get attitude. They believe that God empowers us to actually work. We need to have that kind of mindset where people are able to take their destinies into their own hands. We should have this the kind of view where we see God more as a referee in a match. See, the referee might have his own team he supports, but as long as he's a referee, he has to be objective. You can't say that because he wants Team A to actually win, he will just massage the rules a little bit for that team. So that he has to be fair and objective in all respects. So I believe that the favor that we receive from God has more to do with empowerment. God empowers us. The Bible says in, I think, Deuteronomy 8, verse 18. He said, it is God who gives you power to get to. God is not a magician, per se. But one thing that we are assured he will supply us is the power and is empowerment. Empowerment through ideas, empowerment through the seal he gives us. We need to actually break out of certain conventions. One thing that I've realized is that when Jesus actually didn't give a definition, a defined structure of how church should be run. And even throughout the Bible, the word church, throughout the Gospels also, you even hear Christ making mention of church even once. The point that I want to make is that church goes beyond, the current perception that I see around. What if one thing is sure is that Jesus preached the kingdom of God. That was his message. And so we should actually go back to the basis to understand what the kingdom of God actually is. And if you actually delve into it, you realize that what we call as church is just a fraction of what Jesus actually meant by kingdom of God. And I believe because of this understanding, it has limited our approach in evangelizing the world and infesting all areas of society with the agenda of heaven. I think these are some of my thoughts regarding this.
Okay. I believe we would have to be rounding up for tonight. It's been quite engaging, I should say. It's been quite engaging, and I've enjoyed every bit of the discussion with you guys. We've not even covered half of what we should be discussing, so we will definitely have to continue this conversation for the next session. For tonight, I believe a lot has been said concerning COVID-19 and then what Christians should expect in life after COVID-19, with whether we should be apprehensive of the vaccines that are being proposed or we should be looking at alternative methods. We are ending with the discussion on why we are not hearing so much from the Christian circles, because we believe that we have a lot of technical people. We believe that we have a lot of people who could be authority figures or spokesperson on these issues, but we are not hearing from them. And I think Thomas has raised a very valid point that we might just be speculating. We might not really have the numbers up there as we think, because there are many people who are professing the faith who might not of necessity be in the faith, but then they are professing because of what it might get them in the interim. So that means, as the body of Christ, we really need to look into our affairs very well. I believe we need to go beyond the borders of our church buildings and start looking into how we can actually influence the world. Daniel, being in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar, was able to facilitate a lot of things which ended up helping his people more than Daniel being out of there. For a long time, we've shied away from these organizations, from these institutions, from these bodies. But it's becoming more and more imperative that we need to have more Christians in many of these organizations so that they can influence agendas which might of necessity go against us. Tonight has been an interesting conversation. We'll be continuing this session. We are not through yet. We might have 2 or 3 more sessions. I'm hoping with the same panel so that we can actually digest this issue more. We've not even discussed the issue of 5G and how it relates to the vaccine, and then how it will also relate to the world as we know it after COVID-19. So be sure to join us on the next episode, because we're going to discuss all these issues. We're going to go deep into them. We're going to really digest them solidly. And I'm grateful for the panel I have. Thomas, Alvin, Kingsley, you guys have been awesome tonight. Thank you very much for being such solid guests. Like I mentioned, we will have another session. I think I will discuss with all of you so that we can fix the time for that, and then have the next discussion into what will go into life after COVID-19 with regards to vaccines, 5G, and any other relevant issue concerning this pandemic. My name is Agostino. If you've watched this far, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, share this video, make sure others have access to this video. Let's create conversations in our circles wherever we find ourselves concerning the times and the seasons we are in, because the body of Christ needs to really wake up and realize that times are changing and we need to change. We need to face what is happening in our world head on. We don't need to cower in and then hope that things will pass us by. The world is moving at a very fast pace, and if you don't catch up, we might end up being at the shorter end of the stick. It's been a delight bringing you tonight's show. God be with you. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.